A lot of people skip that step because they think, well, I can set up an LLC. I can file articles of organization with the state. That's easy. And you're right, that is easy. Why would you want to pay an attorney a couple $100s to do that? The reality is that's not what you're paying them to do. You're paying them to look at your risk and to assess it and see, well, this is the goal of the business. This is what we want to do with it. This is how we accomplish that.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 126. Eventually, anyone who's invested in real estate will reach a point in their real estate investing career where they have to decide what to do with their assets. And that is, how do they transition out of their investments? Today, I'm sitting in the studio with Bobbi Hines. And Bobbi is an attorney working with Christ Enderle, and she's a member of their estate planning and elder law practice group. She represents individuals and families in a broad range of estate and asset protection planning in order to protect her clients' wealth. Bobbi will also be teaching a course for the RPOA called Transition Planning for Real Estate Wealth. And the first time she's going to be teaching this course is this coming Tuesday, June 19th of 2018, and the class is going to be from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can go to rpoaonline.org to see when this class will be taught next. Bobbi, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me here.
You are also a real estate investor, and I'd like to just start by learning a little bit about you, your real estate investing that you've done so far, and how you got into the transition planning part of it.
Sure. Yeah, not a problem. Well, when it comes to real estate investing, there are certainly a number of different types of investors. Whether or not you're investing for the purpose of growing your assets or growing your money, or because it's happenstance, is really dependent on the person. For myself and my husband, it ended up being happenstance. So when he and I got married, we each owned our separate pieces of real estate, and in an effort to combine our resources, and of course, due to the marriage, we ended up residing in one house, leaving us with an extra that was open. And ultimately, throughout our marriage, we moved back and forth and ended up with a third. And then we had two pieces of real estate that turned into rentals. Fast forward 3 years of being a landlord, we wanted out. We wanted to transition out. And so the way that I transitioned out is certainly going to be quite a bit different from a lot of the way my clients transition out. And it's also dependent on the goals when you get in there. So my transition out was because we certainly didn't like being landlords.
So let's talk about the different types of transitioning then. And we're talking about real estate here. You transitioned out because you decided early on that you just didn't like being a landlord.
Correct.
So that pretty much probably meant just disposing of the assets.
Indeed, it did.
Now, other people, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, other people go through the strategies. But then at some point, it's time to either retire, get out of the game, pass it on to the next generation, build that generational wealth. That's the type of transition planning that we're talking about today.
Sure.
The clients that you work with, what are they going through when they come to you for transition planning?
A number of different things. So the transition plans that we often see in our office at Christ Enderle is there's people that want to continue in the business but stop operating it. So it's a transition somewhere to someone, but they still want to work that process or work that job. There's others that want to turn over control and completely retire. So those two objectives are going to be very different types of plans. Some want to transition it on to their families. They've got children that are part of the business, or they hope will want to have that business. And then others just simply co-owners. They want to bring on some other co-owners, whether it's friends of theirs that they want to pass it on to because these friends have seen their business grow and they want to continue it. Others have employees that are part of the business that become key man employees. And so they want to provide that employee who has put a lot of their time and effort into it with an option to purchase the business. And so oftentimes they want to transition out and turn it over to a key employee. And then some others just simply say, I don't want to continue running this. It's difficult. I don't have any children. I don't have any friends that would want to take it over or family that is interested. And so they turn it over to charity. So charity is also a very big option that people use. And when it comes to real estate, that could be a very big charitable gift.
And it's not just a matter of charity in that case either, because there are tax benefits to doing such. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And depending on the goal, whether or not the tax benefit is what you need, that's definitely one of the biggest concerns most people come to us with.
So you have to look at the big overall picture. What are some of the questions you ask and some of the things you look at in their situation to help you decide what's going to work best for them?
Sure. Well, that's definitely a loaded question because, again, based on all the different goals that different people have, the advice that I give will be different. But primarily, we want to look at their initial goal when they went in. What steps were taken when they started this business, started this investment, because that's going to have a lot of play on the transitioning out, especially when we're looking at tax consequences. And in order to look at all of this and see it all, I always recommend that we have the full three-legged stool. And by that, I say you should have the attorney. You should have the CPA, and you should have the financial advisor. All three of them need to be involved in this discussion in the beginning and at the end, simply because you need your investment professional with their investment advice, you need your CPA with the tax advice, and then you need your attorney with the legal ramifications. I know a lot of people prefer to have that in one person, but you don't want your your foot surgeon giving you
a heart replacement surgery?
Yeah, a heart replacement surgery to replace a valve in your heart, let's say. And so I always recommend, if somebody is serious about real estate investing, and not just by happenstance like how it turned out with us, that they need to have all three professionals involved at the beginning and at the transition out to make sure all your goals are met and that your taxes are not exorbitant in the end.
So you need to have your professionals, your team there with you to help you determine all of this. Help me understand. Mm-hmm. So the attorney, you'd want your real estate attorney there who helped you set this up in the first place. Maybe set up your LLCs,
Correct.
That kind of thing.
Yep, as well as your buy-sell agreements.
Mm-hmm. You'd need your CPA there to help you with understand the tax consequences.
Correct.
And then what was the third one?
The financial advisor.
Financial advisor who's kind of looking at your overall retirement picture.
Correct.
Are there ways that people who aren't ready for transition planning yet should be thinking in setting up their acquisitions and their purchases and their real estate in order to make things easier when it comes to that point?
Yes, absolutely. When a LLC or a corporation is initially set up for real estate, one of the biggest pitfalls I see is the individuals, while they're incredibly intelligent and able to manage this real estate and they can invest and they can grow assets, the downside is that they don't understand the liability protection that comes with setting up an LLC or a corporation. And so therefore they don't take all the necessary safeguards in setting it up. When you establish an LLC or a corporation, there are some laws that require things to be prepared, documents, operating agreements, buy-sells, and there are some that that are not required. The problem with transitioning out is that if you don't have things set up in the beginning, that transition out is going to be a lot more difficult and cost-effective, or not necessarily cost-effective, but costly for that person. In the very beginning, I see a lot of people just say, I already set up my business. I have my LLC. Well, great. What does that mean? And most of the time they say, well, I filed something with the state and I'm good. That's all that I need. And the reality is, if this is a long-term investment, that is not all you need. You need to have a full corporate book. You need to have an operating agreement. You need to have something that spells out what happens if something happens to you. What is your succession plan? What do you want to do? What are your goals with this business? Absent having all of those things, you're going to have to do that in the end anyway. Before you transition out, you're going to need the operating agreements and these buy-sell agreements establishing what's going to happen.
Can you give us some examples specifically about real estate investors and how they may not have set things up properly in the beginning, and that did cause some added expense when they wanted to transition?
Sure. When it comes to failing to set things up, the biggest thing tends to be that initial operating agreement. You see, LLCs are a great hybrid of the corporation and the partnership. Corporations require this business book, this corporate book is what we call it, and you have to have resolutions and minutes for a lot of things that you do in the business. LLCs don't require that. And so a lot of people think that, since it's not required by that statute, then we don't really need it. But the reality is you do need it to help maintain that liability protection as well as to lay out what's going to happen. The first thing that we look at when we go to do a sale of a business is that initial operating agreement. Can we sell it? Has the authority been granted in these documents that allows the members or the shareholders, whatever type of entity it is, to make these decisions? And some people, they'll just pull one off the internet, and they might be a single member LLC, but they've signed a multi-member LLC where there's 2 members, and there needs to be a unanimous vote that says we can vote this person out, or we can sell the business in this regard. And if it's not consistent, if that end transition goal or attempt that we're doing is not consistent with those initially filed documents, well, you may not be able to get out of this business as easily as you would have thought. And those things will have to be changed and amended in order for you to do so.
So you've seen that then with real estate investors, where maybe they have an operating agreement, but it requires the approval of someone else. Yes. To actually sell or do something.
Yes. And most recently, it was actually discovered in a divorce proceeding. So it was actually a real estate business that one spouse thought was owned by them, but it was them solely, but it was actually by them and their husband that they had just decided to divorce. And so now, wrapped up in all of that, because it was just something general that they got off the internet and one of them quickly filed, it made them both members. Now there's this huge fight over the assets, and one wants to transition out, but one wants to stay a part of it, and they certainly don't want the other to have any percentage. And so this created a huge mess and a huge fight as to what are we going to do with this business? Can we even sell this business to somebody else? Because now we have these competing interests in who owns the business, and there's this litigation that has to be cleared up before they can even sell the business or value it, for that matter.
And a good operating agreement would have that acknowledged. If someone wants to sell and the other person doesn't want to sell, how do you resolve that difference?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. If you have the proper operating agreement in place, it will detail how that is to be done.
So you're not a fan of just going online and pulling down an LLC and using that?
It makes me cringe. It's one of those things that keeps me up at night. But I get it. I understand that people
want to save money. They save money in the front.
Yeah.
It might hurt them in the back
It
end.
certainly does.
So what do you advise? I mean, when it comes to setting up an LLC and an operating agreement, what is your advice?
I say you need to sit down with an attorney. At least sit down and find out from them what is important when you set up this business. Sure, if you don't want to pay them to establish the business and put a corporate book together for you, at least hear what they have to say as what's important and what that liability protection needs in order for you to keep it. A lot of people skip that step because they think, well, I can set up an LLC. I can file articles of organization with the state. That's easy. And you're right, that is easy. Why would you want to pay an attorney a couple $100s to do that? The reality is that's not what you're paying them to do. You're paying them to look at your risk and to assess it and see, well, this is the goal of the business. This is what we want to do with it. This is how we accomplish that. You're not just paying them to set up the articles.
And why is it important from a tax planning perspective to have your CPA involved in these decisions as well?
Oh, goodness. When you've got real estate, you've got the potential for long-term capital gains. The idea when an investor purchases real estate is to pay it off as quickly as possible and to realize those gains, realize that income on an annual basis. Well, if it's not structured in such a way that you can stretch out these gains, you're going to have a large tax consequence as the years go on. Meeting with that CPA and making sure that whether it's a short-term investment or a long-term investment, that the way that the depreciation is going to be realized on those tax returns is done in accordance with that long-term or short-term goal. Not having that in the very beginning, that's going to cost you thousands of dollars in unnecessary taxes.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. And then the same for your financial planner. I mean, a lot of people may not have all three of those, the CPA, the attorney, and the financial planner. Why is the financial planner important in this equation?
A financial planner is going to assess your wealth as a whole. Ideally, a great financial planner looks at everything, not just the investments that you've got with them. Instead, it's with all the different baskets that we may keep our assets in, but also looking at how your current assets are held and what are good assets to use in investing new real estate. So when you want to purchase new real estate, you don't necessarily want to take pre-tax dollar monies out, liquidate them, and then have income tax consequences on that, and turn around and put that into a real estate then and realize some secondary tax issues and consequences. So meeting with the financial advisor to determine what assets are liquid and what are good assets to turn to liquid to use for the purpose of this investment, and really just kind of comparing your rate of return.
And let's talk about the transition planning process. What are the steps that you take people through to accomplish that?
Well, first, after we've established what it is that they want to do and how they set up this business, I go through a 6-step process. That process starts with initially looking at what is the asset? Let's identify the value of that asset. And a lot of clients can't necessarily get from that point on, because being able to value small, closely held businesses can be very difficult. And in the course, we're going to talk about the ways to get that value. So once we've identified the values and the objectives of the client, then we want to quantify the business and the personal financial resources. We want to make sure that there's enough liquid, enough assets there to continue the growth and continue the speed at which assets are paid down and paid off, thus realizing more growth on a regular basis. And a lot of people think, oh, that's not necessary. We can continue to roll over our debts and incur more debts to build this cash flow. I personally don't think that's important. To some degree, you're going to have debt that you need to get and that you're going to use for the business for the benefit. But over leveraging it is a fear of my own. And so that's something I walk clients through when we do get to that point. So using some of your personal financial resources, using the right ones, is really key. Making sure that they're the right tax qualified monies. Then once we've established what the value is and we've determined that we have enough financial resources, then we want to grow. How are we going to grow this business? And this is step 3, is you want to grow, increase the value of that so that the sale value in the end is continued to be increased. When you've got a piece of real estate by happenstance, how we ended up being landlords for 3 years, you're not always looking at maximizing the growth on that. Our objective in that was just to make sure that the mortgage was paid, and so was the taxes and insurance, until we decided whether or not we were going to sell or maintain it as a real estate investment. Where other individuals that have these rental pieces of property, they want to grow that, and they need to figure out how to grow that by not just maintaining the property or just paying the mortgage, but you need to pay down that mortgage. You need to check things in your community as far as rental rates. Look at things, make sure you're where you need to be. And a lot of people, when they're running a business, they tend to work in that business day to day, every single day, and they don't take a step out and look at the business and work on it. And I think if people took a little bit more time to work on the business, even 4 hours, 1 day a week. And I know that almost seems like a lot, but on a Monday morning from 6 to 10 in the morning, just sit down and kind of go over goals of the business. That's going to be important to see ways to grow that business.
Yeah, so stop me if I'm getting ahead of your 6-step process here, but it seems like taking that bird's eye view is important in order to see how your business is running, and is it sellable? Is it something that is ready to be passed on, or have you maximized its value? That's something that needs to happen probably years before you actually actually transition.
Definitely, because the value of your business, there's value drivers, things that are going to drive it to be a higher value. And one of those is just regular repeated work and growth on the business itself. And by growth here, I'm not saying the money or dollars in your pocket. I'm saying the actual way in which you've continued to build this business with systems, with processes in place, with manuals. Is this something that somebody's going to want to walk into and say, yes, I want to buy that? Well, if there's no manuals, there's no steps, and it's just been a business that you've kind of ran out of your back pocket for the last 20 years, you're not going to get very many buyers. They need to find a business that will run without you. And that is a big component to getting our clients to see that the sellable value really has a lot more to do with the business itself and not your skill.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see all the time with real estate investors, and you probably see this with business owners, who own a business, is that they're so involved with managing the real estate and managing the property and doing the repairs that they don't see that that's value that they're putting into it, but a buyer is not going to value it the same way they do, which is why you see a lot of overinflated estimations on the part of the owner of that property as to what that property is actually worth. They're not taking into account, well, the buyer is probably going to hire a management company. They're actually going to pay someone to do those repairs. And those are expenses they need to figure in because they don't want to turn it in. They don't want to buy a full-time job. Exactly. They want to buy a cash flowing rental property.
Yep, exactly. And before you can even think to sell this property, you have to have something in place that doesn't require you specifically. If you're the special skill in this, if you're the person that's the driver and making sure the management is being done and that the rent is coming in, you're not going to get much of a buyer. You're not going to get people that want to walk in and do that. But you set it up so that you've got people that are paying the bills, that it's an entity that you can go on a boat to Florida for the entire summer and you can return and the business has continued to go. That's something that's going to be sellable.
Yeah. Now, do you advise people, your clients, on those topics? I mean, do you advise them that, hey, they need to figure out how to do this? Or do you also advise them on how to do it?
Oh, no, we certainly tell them this is something you need to do. And then we go over ways to do that. It's all part of the income drivers, the sell drivers discussion that I have in this course that we're going to talk about, ways to increase the value, ways to get you out of the business, and how to leverage your time to increase the growth. So we'll definitely talk about that in the class because it's one of the most important things you can do for a business.
Absolutely. So please go on with your list.
Once we've maximized that value, we want to protect it. And so in the class, we're going to talk about ways to maintain the value that you've already got there. Once you've maintained it and you're able to maximize it and you just see continued growth without you present, then is a time where you might want to discuss, okay, how do I get rid of this business when I want to? You don't have to decide that the day you finally decide to retire. It is something you want to think about ahead of time. So the transition at that point is, well, you want to determine the transition strategy. How am I going to want to get rid of this? Do I have family? Do I have children that are working in the business? Do I want to give it to them? Do I just want to sell it right now and move on to a whole different career? Sometimes people switch careers. That's certainly possible, but you have to determine the strategy. And there's a number of different ways that you can transition out of that business.
When you talk to business owners or real estate rental property owners, how many of them actually have systems in place that make sense? I mean, is there a ratio in your mind? Well, probably half the people are going to be doing it right. The other half are and half is generous to say that. For the most part, most people don't have systems in place, at least when they come to see us. Hopefully when they leave us, they've got those in place. And if they were to go to, another facility, they'll have those systems because we've encouraged that and continued to talk about its importance. But for the most part, no, people do not put their systems in place. They don't write down what they do on a day-to-day basis. They think that there's not as much importance in that. But the reality is there is, because that's what carries the day. And if from day one or day 352, they can just start writing down what they do from the moment that they start the day to the moment that they end the day. And then they'll start to see after a week or so of writing these things down, like, wow, there is a bunch of things that I do. And after I do write it down for a couple weeks, then I see there's a lot of repetitive things that I do. And once you see the repetition in what's done, that's a system. That's a process. But getting people out of their own heads, I think, is the biggest part, is they think, no, this is it's little nonsense. I'm going to quickly do it today. Well, you quickly do that every single Monday. Put that in a handbook. Make one, a different divider for each day. What do I do Mondays, Tuesdays? And then that begins your system, setting your systems in place. And once you realize after a month or 2 months worth of writing this down, you really do build that system into a written manual. And that turns your business into something that can be sold. And if you can identify those repeatable tasks, you can also identify which ones of them you want to have other people do for you.
Exactly. And where you can leverage your time. If you're running a business and you have this great entrepreneurial mind and spirit, well, then maybe you shouldn't be cutting the lawn. Maybe you need to be out there figuring out ways to increase the rents, increase the profits while somebody else cuts that lawn. You just have to understand the value of your own time and leverage that with other people.
Value of your own time to the business or the rental property as well.
Exactly.
Is cutting the lawn really helping your business, or is it just saving you a few bucks?
Exactly. No, that's a really good way to put it. So yes, once you've been able to determine which strategy of transition you want to do, then at that point you want to manage the risk and protect the assets that you've got. So moving on then to step 5 in this course is we're going to talk about all the risk that's going to come along with your different transition strategies. There's a whole bunch of different ones we talked about briefly. Some you can continue into the business, just sell it. You can sell it, or you can retire. You can turn it over to family. And there's a number of different ways to accomplish all of these. You can bring on co-owners. Every one of them, though, comes with different risks and different consequences, whether it's going to be tax-wise or liability-wise or ownership or the amount of money that you can ultimately sell it for. So depending on the risk, you have to manage the risk at that time. And once we've determined what that's going to be, then we can move forward on building that strategy. Once we've determined what the risk is and how we're going to protect the assets, then we make sure we have that down into a buy-sell agreement, into a succession plan. Finally, you want to make sure that it's also wrapped into the estate plan. So the estate plan is the plan that somebody puts into place of what's going to happen to their assets when they die. And this is the step that I see a lot of people skip. They just think, well, I'm gone. What do I care? Well, the reality is to get your transition in place in this plan and maximize the value of this business, you have to have the exit planned to completion.
All the way to your death.
Yeah, completion means all the way to our death. There's been many business plans that have fallen through, or transition plans that have fallen through because it wasn't wrapped into the estate plan. And I tell you, when we pass away, if we don't have a will or a trust or something in place, the state of Michigan has a plan for us. Whether or not we like it or it fits into this original 6-step transition that we worked through, well, that's really going to depend on what your goals are. And the likelihood is that statute that Michigan gives you does not fit into the plan that you want for your business.
Do you have any examples, any horror stories?
Oh, goodness. That? I do. So many. There's one probate matter that I can think of. Probate is the court where when people pass away, if there is no will or if there is a will, but assets that were in somebody's name when they passed away, probate is the process of transferring those pieces of property to the beneficiaries. Well, if you haven't put in place who gets your assets when you die, like I said, the state of Michigan is going to determine who that is. In this particular circumstance, this probate estate that I'm thinking of, there was a family business. However, wrapped up in that family business was also a key employee. And the person was named as a key employee in a document that said they're the manager, they're actually managing this. There is, in fact, life insurance on this key employee for this person in case that person were to pass away. It pays into the business. It helps the business owner reestablish someone else and provide some other goals. Well, when the business owner passed away, there was actually no succession plan fully put in place. There was also no will put in place. So the state of Michigan says, all right, any assets that are in this person's name are going to first go to the spouse. And if no spouse, then children. And it's this long formula. But ideally, the conflict arose out of the child's interest. So when he passed away, he left a child that wanted the business. So this person's son was in line to receive it under the statute of Michigan, but the way that the business had been run for the 20 years prior, it should have gone to the key man. And it was pretty clear that that was the owner's intent. However, it was never finalized. And so this key man that had put their 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears into this business now no longer have the interest that they thought they did. They thought they were going to have an option to buy. And that was the discussions, but it was never solidified into a document, and it was never put into the will that in the event that I do have a membership interest in XYB LLC, it will go on to so-and-so. You know, there was nothing put in the will about that. So the state of Michigan in the probate court could not force this business to go to that key employee. And the key employee was sitting here with their hands in the air like, hey, I thought this was going to be mine, while they're disputing with the owner's son. And it did not turn out well. Nobody was happy in the end, and nobody got paid. Where if there was a plan that was put in place ahead of time, there's a really good chance that there would have been insurances, other policies that were put in place to pay for the business to properly pass it on to this key employee while a payment is put back to the estate for the son. The son that had nothing to do with the business for the last 20 years and had no idea how to run it. And I can tell you within 5 years of the son getting that business out of the probate estate, it closed. And that's the very last thing most business owners want for their legacy. Some do say, go ahead, just let it go. It can die with me. But for the most part, if it's a 20-year plus business that they revolve their world around and their life around, they want it to go on. And it was just sad to see.
Yeah, so follow through is important.
It is.
It's not just your intent and what you want, but following through to make sure that's in writing. It's in the will.
Exactly.
And it's explicit so that the probate court can't question it.
Yeah, it will make it so much easier to enforce when you don't have something in writing. People say, well, verbal contract's just as good. It's good because it's binding if you can prove it. You never know who's going to stand up and contest something. And most of the people say, no, my kids won't. They'll never. Well, unfortunately, when we pass away, we don't know what our children are going to do without us there.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of
when
horror
we're alive,
stories.
we don't know what our children are going to do.
Yeah, right, exactly. Of course.
There, yeah. So, okay. So, and that, I take it that's probably part of the exercise that you take your clients through.
Yes.
Is let's talk about what you would like to see, and let's make sure it's written down or it's solidified in the right places to make sure it actually happens.
Exactly. And a lot don't want to do it on the onset. They would say, just let it happen later. But the reality is it's going to cost a lot more and it's going to give a lot of headaches to your family.
Yeah. And people don't think they're going to die.
No, we're all invincible.
Yeah. So it's like, I'll take care of it next year or whenever.
Yep.
But, hopefully you'll be around next year. But if not, it's better to take care of these things sooner rather than later. I believe that was number 5, wasn't it? Did you have number
5
6?
was manage risk and protect assets. So the last step was to build and pass that wealth, leaving a legacy. And that's the estate planning or elder law portion.
For those who are looking forward to taking your course for the RPOA, tell us what they can expect, what you plan on making sure they walk away with.
Sure. In my seminar style, I prefer to make sure people understand things. I will engage them. I will do what I can to answer their questions. I try to not have a course where every person in the room wants to tell their entire story, and so the class just kind of gets enveloped with personal stories versus the general nature, but I always welcome that discussion afterwards. But during the class itself, I'm going to engage you. I'm going to try to walk you through some case scenarios. Most importantly, I'm going to give you options. I'm going to show you that there is a myriad of options available to you in all these different steps. Sometimes the options might be somewhat overwhelming, but I do pride myself on being able to help bring people back from that, from that overwhelming feeling. Because it does. When you're running a business, all you want to do is work the business, and taking the time to work on it is not your top priority. And I'm going to work with the class on seeing the importance of that it really is. If you want to grow this, that you need to go through and look at all of your options that are available to you. And just knowing what those are, in my opinion, is the key to anything to make anything successful.
And for real estate investors and landlords, like, what should they be looking forward to in your class?
The options of leveraging the assets, growing the assets and the value. I see a lot of people that have invested in real estate, and they've started out by just having one piece of rental real estate, residential real estate. And they see this revolving cycle of, well, I just get the rents in and I turn around and I pay what's there. And at the end of the day, there really isn't much left. And they get so inundated into this just revolving cycle of work, not much back, that they really aren't able to step outside of it and look at ways to grow it. And I think this class is good because it forces you to. It forces you to stop, because you're already outside the business. In fact, you're sitting in a classroom with me. So you can't leave and go work your business. You have to sit here and we're going to brainstorm, and we're going to talk about the different ways that we can grow this business, how we can change the value of it. Because a lot of people think, well, no, value of the real estate, that's just going to be, as real estate increases, maybe add an addition. But for the most part, they don't see all the options that there really are available to build the business. We all want to retire. All right. And if you want to retire, we have to determine what our assets are to be able to do that. And I think taking this class is going to help people look at that. It's going to help them maximize their wealth from their business, show ways that they can increase their assets, how to reinvest real estate profits to increase the wealth in their business. They're going to learn how to choose the best transition option for them, reduce or eliminate taxes and expenses that come along with this business. Also to, as we talked about, protect assets, minimize their risk based on the choice that they make, and how to pass their wealth on to others and to leave the legacy behind that they want to. Now, the types of people that are going to want to attend this class are, it's a full range. You can have rental real estate owners that are just part-time landlords, 1 property, 2 properties. You can be somebody that does this all the time, that is your primary job. Real estate investors and investment companies would do well in coming to this. Also real estate brokers, property management company owners, vendors or contractors that are serving in the real estate community, or anybody that's just people thinking about doing these types of things would be great to come and sit down and have this overview of other things that you need to look at when you buy real estate.
As we wrap it up here, what advice do you have for our listeners? I think you've given us some great tips and advice already, but what else would you like them to take away from this conversation?
There's more to do than you realize. Don't overwhelm yourself, but just ask. Just reach out and ask somebody, anybody, whether it's me or another professional that deals in the real estate community. Just ask. Do not try to go about it alone.
Yeah, great advice. Bobbi, how would someone get a hold of you if they want to continue the conversation and have questions for you? Yeah,
they can certainly give me a call or shoot me an email. I am far more responsive on email simply because it comes with me, and I tend to reply on email. My email is bshines, BSHINES, and that's KEHB.com. For Christ, Enderly, Hudgens, and Borsos is the name of my firm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And my direct dial to my desk is area code 616-254-8419. You can feel free to give me a call there or to send me an email.
I want to thank you for taking the time to come
My pleasure.
Talk to us.
Definitely.
Your class, let's give another plug for your class for the RPOA. It's coming up June 19th at 10 a.m. That's June 19th of 2018. And it's going to be in the RPOA office there.
Correct.
You can go to rpoaonline.org to sign up for it or find out more information. And if you're listening to this episode after June 19th of 2018, you're still going to be teaching the class. We just don't know what those dates are.
Sure.
And you can still go to rpoaonline.org to get that schedule as well. So, Bobbi, I want to say thank you. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.